The Rattrap by Selma Lagerlöf. About the author. Selma Lagerlöf lived from 1858 to 1940. She was a Swedish writer whose stories has been translated into many languages. A universal theme runs through all of them. A belief that the essential goodness in a human being can be awakened through understanding and love. This story is set amidst the mines of Sweden, rich in iron ore, which figure large in the history and legends of that country. The story is told somewhat in the manner of a fairy tale. Let's start. Once upon a time, there was a man who went around selling small rat traps of wire. He made them himself at odd moments from the material he got by begging in the stores or at the big farms. But even so, the business was not specially profitable, so he had to resort to both begging and petty thievery to keep body and soul together. Even so, his clothes were in rags, his cheeks were sunken, and hunger gleamed in his eyes. No one can imagine how sad and monotonous life can appear to such a vagabond who plods along the road left to his own meditations. But one day this man had fallen into a line of thought which really seemed to him entertaining. He had naturally been thinking of his rat traps when suddenly he was struck by the idea that the whole world around him, about him, the whole world with its lands and seas, its cities and villages, was nothing but a big rat trap. It had never existed for any other purpose than to set baits or traps for people. It offered riches and joys, shelter and food, heat and clothing, exactly as the rat trap offered cheese and pork. And as soon as anyone let himself be tempted to touch the bait, it closed in on him. And then everything came to an end. The world had, of course, never been very kind to him, so it gave him unwanted or rare joy to think ill of it in this way. It became a cherished pastime of his, during many dreary or dull ploddings, to think of people he knew who had let themselves be caught in the dangerous snare or trap, and of others who were still circling around the bait. One dark evening, as he was trudging along or walking laboriously the road, he caught sight of a little grey cottage by the roadside, and he knocked on the door to ask shelter for the night. Nor was he refused. Instead of the sour or distasteful faces which ordinarily met him, the owner, who was an old man without wife or child, was happy to get someone to talk to in his loneliness. Immediately, he put the porridge pot on the fire and gave him supper. Then he carved off such a big slice from his tobacco roll that it was enough both for the stranger's pipe and his own. Finally, he got out an old pack of cards and played mules, or a Swedish card game, with his guest until bedtime. The old man was just as generous with his confidences as with his porridge and tobacco. The guest was informed at once that in his days of prosperity, his host had been a crofter, or someone who rents and works at a small farm, at Ramsjö Iron Works. Ramsjö, let me tell you, is a village in Sweden. Okay, so this host was a crofter at Ramsjö Iron Works and had worked on the land. Now that he was no longer able to do day labor, it was his cow who supported him. Yes, that bossy, that cow was extraordinary. She could give milk for the creamery every day. And last month, he had received all of 30 kronor in payment. Kronor is the Swedish currency. The stranger must have seemed incredulous or quizzical, for the old man got up and went to the window, took down a leather pouch which hung on a nail in the very window frame and picked out 3 wrinkled 10 kroner notes or bills. These he held up before the eyes of his guest, nodding knowingly, and then stuffed them back into the pouch. Woo! The next day, both men got up in good season. The crofter was in a hurry to milk his cow, and the other man probably thought he should not stay in bed when the head of the house had gotten up. They left the cottage at the same time. The crofter locked the door and put the key in his pocket. The man with the rat traps said goodbye and thank you, and thereupon each went his own way. But half an hour later, the rat trap peddler stood again before the door. He did not try to get in, however. He only went up the window, smashed a pane, which means he broke a part of the window, stuck in his hand, and got hold of the pouch with the 30 kroner. He took the money and thrust or pushed it into his own pocket. Then he hung the leather pouch very carefully back in its place and went away. As he walked along with the money in his pocket, he felt quite pleased with his smartness. He realized, of course, that at first he dared not continue on the public highway, but must turn off the road into the woods. During the first hours, this caused him no difficulty. Later in the day, it became worse, for it was a big and confusing forest which he had gotten into. He tried, to be sure, to walk in a definite direction, but the paths twisted back and forth so strangely. He walked and walked without coming to the end of the wood, and finally he realized that he had only been walking around in the same part of the forest. All at once he recalled his thoughts about the world and the rat trap. Now his own turn had come. He had let himself be fooled by a bait and had been caught. The whole forest, with its trunks and branches, its thickets and fallen logs, closed in upon him like an impenetrable prison, from which he could never escape. It was late in December. Darkness was already descending over the forest. This increased the danger and increased also his gloom and despair. Finally, he saw no way out, and he sank down on the ground, tired to death, thinking that his last moment had come. But just as he laid his head on the ground, he heard a sound, a hard, regular thumping. There was no doubt as to what that was. He raised himself. "Those are the hammer strokes from an iron mill," he thought. "There must be people nearby." He summoned all his strength, got up, and staggered or walked unsteadily in the direction of the sound. Wow! Here we are done with part 1 of this beautiful chapter called the Rat Trap. Please follow my part 2 for further lesson reading. Thank you. This is Tell a Tale with Heena. Do subscribe to my channel.